These four things are guaranteed to kill your relationship. I'm Paul, apexmindset.net to book a consultation. Like the video, share the video, make sure you're subscribed, hit the notification bell. Let's get into four relationship killers. Now, people can do a lot of things in relationships and still make it. All right. Sometimes conflicts, sometimes problems can lead to fixing things, can lead to personal development, and can lead to an LTR lasting for a very long time in a closer bond. But if somebody has certain character flaws and certain things that they refused to give up and change, then there is going to be no continuation of a relationship. And I bet you think it's things like deception or dishonesty or cheating or toxic fighting or a number of those things. But believe it or not, those are not the four killers necessarily. These four things were figured out by Dr. John Gottman. He's the founder of modern counseling and family therapy, at least kind of noted as that from the Gottman Institute. Now, to be fair, there's a lot of things from that institute that I don't necessarily fully agree with. Okay. But these four things are spot on. All right. And those are criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So if those four things show up consistently in your relationship, you're probably not going to make it. And he has some data on this. He determined that if anywhere from one to these four things were prevalent in a relationship, it had a 90% chance of failing. Now, we're looking at not just wanting to succeed, whatever that means, but we're wanting to be at least in that top, 10% or more that can be happy, preferably in the top 1 or 2% of relationships that are absolute bliss, absolute happiness. So that's what we're going for here when we give relationship advice. But certainly can't make it to the top 1 or 2% if you can't survive. And you're not going to survive if either of your partner has one of these four things that they use. All right. And so the basis of these four things, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling, is arrogance and disrespect for your partner. This actually applies to both males and females, but I generally am speaking to a mostly male audience, so keep that in mind when I use that terminology. But if your woman, disrespects you, is disrespectful to you, does not have respect for you, she cannot love you. If there is no love for you if there is no respect. Those two go hand in hand. So when she is being disrespectful to you, she is not loving you. All right. And so these are some ways in which disrespect shows up. And when she's doing those things, that is not love. In that moment, her emotional state is not being in love with you. And so you can't accept these things in your relationship. These have to be hard standards. And when we start going through them, you'll sort of see that they're real common. In fact, they exist in most relationships. But most relationships fail. So we have to remove these four things from our long-term relationships, or not get into long-term relationships with women who have the tendency to do these four things, because really you're just going to set yourself up for failure. You can't maintain frame in a relationship and maintain that relationship leadership with your woman, if she has these four things. And if you're doing these four things, you can't properly lead or maintain frame for very long. It'll create reactions from her that will eventually cause her to lead or exit the relationship or fall out of pocket, out of frame with you. Okay. Now, so disrespect is the core of those four relationship killers. And the other part is arrogance. When someone is arrogant, they're demonstrating an incapability of being healthy and having good relationships with people in general. All right. That's the fact of the matter. And arrogance is believing that you are righteous and better than everybody else. And I don't care how good somebody is to you. I don't care if you've done a bunch of bad things and they've just, they do all the good things, right? Let's say you've made a bunch of mistakes and they don't make as many mistakes. If they're arrogant, they're making the biggest mistake that you could make. They're making the biggest mistake of them all. Arrogance is the root of these 4 relationship killers, and it's the root of problems in a it's just the root of not loving another person. Respect, disrespect, and arrogance. Arrogance is where you just have an overall feeling of superiority to that other person. The story behind the Apex rifle is my friend from Next Level Customs approached me and said, "Hey, Paul, I want to make a rifle and I want you to sponsor it on your channel, and I want the rifle to be everything that you would want in a battle rifle AR-15 platform. It's the Apex rifle." Well, that is what we have here, and you can order it on my website. The link will be in the description. Arrogant people have an exaggerated sense. Arrogant people have an exaggerated sense of self-importance. And they think that they're beyond you, and they think that they're better than you. And they think that they're better than everybody else. And that state of mind means that they won't have compassion for you, empathy for you. They won't see their own flaws or problems in a conflict or an argument. They won't see their own faults. They won't be able to correct their own faults. And they won't be able to have compassion for you so you can correct any faults that you might have had or any shortcomings that you might have had. If a woman thinks that she is better than you because she's an arrogant person, she will disrespect you. And not only that, that will cause her desire for you to go away, because she requires at least to be able to see you as a better genetic option than her. All right. And I don't mean inherently better as a human being necessarily, but just better as terms of as a genetic option for mating. Her instinctual brain in hypergamy states that she needs to think she's mating upward. If she is arrogant, and she is generally arrogant when she approaches her relationships, I'm talking in general, casual, not just romantic ones, but platonic ones and family relationships as well. That general arrogance will mean that when she gets in relationship with you, she'll stop seeing you as her hypergamous best option. Even if you are, she will inevitably disrespect, devalue you. And then that'll lead to discarding or continuing to beat you up in the relationship for not being her better, so to speak. So arrogance is an overall attitude that destroys relationships as well as disrespect, and that leads to these 4 relationship killers. All right, so let's go over them real quick. Criticism. All right. Now, it's one thing to set a standard or a boundary. Okay. Let's say you say, and we'll talk about it from the male, talking to the female perspective, because you guys watching this, you can't be guilty of these things either. Because if you're guilty of these things, then you're going to destroy your own relationship, because she will eventually fall out of frame with you. All right. So let's say she gets drunk and she's disrespectful to you, okay, in front of a bunch of other people. You can say, "I don't appreciate that, getting wasted like that, and I'm not going to tolerate that kind of behavior in front of other people. I understand you're intoxicated, but that's just not okay. That's not healthy. That's not good for our relationship." Okay. That's attacking the behavior. You see, you're talking about the behavior and what was done and how we don't have that standard. Now, if you fly off the handle and call her a drunk, stupid, idiot, slut, how dare you talk to me that way, you piece of crap, right? Throw in all the swear words, okay? Because I'm not going to swear too much on YouTube. That is being critical of the person, all right? Now, it doesn't have to be quite so toxic. Women have creative ways of being critical of men without making it sound quite so abusive, when of course it is. Oh, you always do that. Or, oh, you're such an idiot. Or, why are you so absent-minded? Why is it you never listen to me? You're such a terrible listener. This is criticism. All right. Now, obviously, if she has an issue and she wants to talk about the behaviors, that's healthy boundary setting. That's talking about things that bother you. That's having good adult healthy communication. But criticizing the other person, if you're criticizing someone, if she's criticizing you, you're a terrible listener, you just don't listen to me, you don't care, whatever, and saying things like that. Let's say that's the criticism. You just only think about yourself. You just don't care, right? That kind of stuff. That is coming from a place of arrogance and disrespect. She's not, she says you always do something, these things. This is disrespectful to you, because there are plenty of times that I'm sure you do listen, she's not recognizing it. Furthermore, she is coming from a place of superiority. I'm sure she listens to you all the time just fine, right? I'm sure she does everything right all the time. Well, no, of course she doesn't, right? But if she is attacking you like that, the assumption is I'm better than you. I don't do these things, and therefore you're a lesser human being and a terrible human being for doing these things. Even if there are things that she doesn't do, right? She does other things that are wrong, and I'm sure she doesn't want to be attacked and demeaned and devalued for those things. All right. So when people do things that are wrong, even terrible things, right? There needs to be a sense of compassion for that other person and their mistake, particularly if they're recognizing, owning the mistake, and trying to get better. All right. Criticism is assuming that the other person is incapable of getting better, and therefore you're better than them, and that you need to degrade them and devalue them for that mistake. And that obviously is coming from a place of arrogance, right? And coming from a place of disrespect, and not at all coming from a place of love. But people are very critical of their partners all the time in relationships. Well, I promise you, too much of that kind of behavior, and it's going to kill the relationship. Let's look at defensiveness. Now, defensiveness is often a response to criticism. Okay. And so defensiveness is where somebody will say, I, you say I'm not a good listener. Well, you're not a good communicator. If you weren't such an idiot and you could tell me what was going on with yourself, then maybe I would listen to you more. All right. That's a one way of being defensive. Explaining yourself. Well, no, that's not what it is. And, whatever. And getting into explanations that are designed for you to defend yourself and attack the other person. Usually that's also coming from a place of arrogance, because you're not owning any mistakes that you've made. All right. You're assuming an air of superiority and that you have different standards for yourself or than everybody else, or that you should have different standards because you're somehow better, or that you didn't really make a mistake when you did. Now, maybe you didn't make a mistake, but getting defensive about it and attacking back and getting into explaining and over-explaining where you're not hearing the other person's concerns. You can hear the other person's concerns and say, I understand what you're saying. I don't agree with that. That's not exactly what happened. All right. That's one thing. But being defensive and saying, and then turning around, especially part of defensiveness is usually attacking the other person for their attack on you. Well, now you're getting into disrespect and you're getting into arrogance. And defensiveness is usually a response to criticism. All right. So a lot of times women will criticize men, and then men will turn around and, well, I worked all day and that's why I didn't take out the trash, and maybe you should get off your ass every now and then, right? That would be an example of defensiveness. Okay. And so they're both coming, whether it's criticism or defensiveness, they're coming from an arrogant place. It's a belief that you're better than the other person and you don't need to communicate like an adult. Even if you disagree with the other person's criticisms, you don't have to agree with it, but you don't have to take an air of superiority and defend and explain yourself instead of simply disagreeing and saying why that might be. Now, a criticism, when someone's criticizing you or when someone's being defensive, especially defensive where they're attacking you in return and giving themselves excuses for their behaviors, a better idea is to not accept that. So if you're in a relationship and let's say your woman is criticizing you, all right, and being critical of you as a person, not the behavior, a best answer is to say, hey, look, I don't think we should be talking to each other like that. It's not respectful. It's not loving. Obviously, we're heated. Let's take some time here, cool off, and have a discussion like an adult. Now, if she doesn't let you get that out, well, then you leave the premises, maybe send that over in a text message. We need to cool off. Things are too heated. I'll come back in a little while. All right. That's how you handle things like criticism. You have to set the standard in your relationship by not allowing that to continue. The other person is emotionally heated and they're going to go into a bunch of criticism. I don't care what you did wrong. All right. Coming from that emotional place and then criticizing you only reinforces their arrogance that they're having in that moment, their self-righteousness, their disrespect towards you, and their hatred and contempt towards you, which we're about to get to as the third thing that kills relationships. Okay. We don't want to reinforce that by participating in that discussion. And being defensive in return to those criticism is participating in that discussion. And it's also taking an air of arrogance and not respecting the other person for their concerns or complaints. Even though they're using criticism where you in disrespecting us, when you're disrespecting the person in return, that is continuing or propagating that cycle. And what that cycle is contempt for your partner, which is number 3. Okay. It's propagating a cycle of not caring about, not having compassion for your partner, but instead hating and disregarding your partner or having contempt for your partner, which is probably the biggest killer is contempt. So contempt is outright coming from an arrogant place in a disrespectful place. All right. There is nothing else but arrogance and disrespect. All right. It's directly, again, arrogance and disrespect is a part of all 4 of these things, but that is probably most directly related to contempt and most blatantly shows up in contempt, because that's where your partner just has an overall disgust for you, disregard for you, devaluing of you. You know this is happening when she is finding fault in everything you do or seeking out reasons to find fault or to hate you or to be angry with you. That is contempt. At that point, she's not loving you. There is no love that she has for you in the moment that she is doing those things. Understand that for women particularly, emotions are not permanent. They are in the moment. Okay. So she may have loved you yesterday or 2 days before, but when she has contempt for you, overall disgust for you as a human being, and she's devaluing you, she's seeing everything you do as wrong and magnifying those things to be bigger than they are, and then reducing or diminishing anything that you've done as right. And she is coming from a place of contempt, mimicking you, disregarding you, having no regards for your feelings or how you are, your well-being for that matter. It's pretty close to hatred. All right. And so that's a place that you never want to be. And if you get there, you never want to stay there that long. If your woman has contempt for you, the relationship is close to being over. It is being held by a few strings. All right. And so that has to get repaired very quickly or it is over if there is contempt. Okay. Now, if you made mistakes to cause that contempt, it still doesn't justify it. Because remember, contempt is coming from a place of arrogance. So this other person thinks because they didn't make the same mistakes as you, that they're somehow better than you. Oftentimes, that person, because relationships involve two people, did things to propagate that mistake, are doing things to not allow you to correct the mistake, not having patience for you, not having compassion for you, not allowing you to go through a process that you might have to go through to fix things in the relationship, saying, yes, I want to be in the relationship and I want to fix things. And then she's not allowing you to do that. And then you're maybe making other mistakes, or some things that you're doing aren't exactly the right thing. And then she is, magnifying that and using that as more ammo to see you as a terrible person. And this is something that people can fall into. It's not an intentional thing. Doesn't mean they're a terrible person when they do it, but they fall into these behaviors because they're emotionally hurting. They're having issues, maybe, and they're dealing with their own emotions, anxieties, and distress over the relationship. And that's causing them to have contempt for you. But if somebody is an arrogant person, they don't look at those distressing emotions and say, man, these are my emotions to handle. And if I'm working on a problem with my partner, I got to let them handle their emotions and let them handle their mistakes. And I have to have compassion for them. And I need to do the same with mine. No, a place of arrogance is assuming that when they have contempt for their partner, that's coming from a place of arrogance. They assume that they're superior and this other person is not capable and not valuable. And that's the message that they send to their partner and to themselves. They try to reinforce that idea. And that is the essence of hatred, really. And that will lead to doing all kinds of terrible things to the other person and then justifying the terrible things that they're doing and the treatment of the other person, all because, well, they made this mistake. They did this thing to me. And what a terrible person. If you have to end a relationship because of boundary crossings and breaks, and just because she can't do it or your feelings aren't there or whatever, that's fine, understandable, but don't do it from a place of arrogance and disrespect for your partner, because arrogance and disrespect is an indicator of your flaws and your shortcomings, your pridefulness and inability to have compassion for another person. That's not about the other person. That's about you. And again, that doesn't mean you accept bad behavior, when you accept continual boundary crossings, or if major boundaries are crossed and you have to end it, that's okay. But you end it with compassion. You don't end it with contempt and criticism and hatred and devaluing for that other person, because that makes you pretty damn arrogant. Because guaranteed you make mistakes and you screw up all the time. And wouldn't it be nice if other people would show you some compassion when you do those things, right? And so, fourth thing, stonewalling. So stonewalling can be used as a manipulation tool. Stonewalling is where you stop communicating altogether. You either are in the moment and you shut down, you stop communicating, or you get up, leave, walk out of the communication, drop her off, ghost. Okay, these things are stonewalling. Now, I know some of you guys who've watched my channel are going to say, well, what about the soft next? Soft next is not stonewalling. Soft next is when she clearly knows what is going on and what boundaries are crossed. You clearly know what is going on, what boundaries are crossed. And now you're going to take a break from each other and allow her to sort of think about what went on. Maybe if her emotions are high, they can come down to a reasonable state for a discussion if one needs to be had, or maybe there's no discussion that needs to be had, but you guys are taking a break because of a very clear boundary cross that both of you are very aware of. All right. And so that break can be to communicate more about that later, where you're coming to the table like two mature people who care about each other, or that break can be just to allow you to cool off, that other person to cool off, and, kind of get back to normal. Maybe there isn't a discussion that needs to be had because she knows what she did, and, you do too. And you just come back and be normal again. All right. Not everything needs to be some deep psychology session moment for every problem. All right. Sometimes you just know they know and you can solve it, move forward as long as they're not being repeated. All right. But that being said, though, there's the other person knows and understands that. And that's what is the difference. Okay. And you may have to say, hey, you know what? We can't talk to each other like that. Our emotions are too high. We'll talk when I cool off and you cool off. And then you separate, and then you're not answering texts and stuff, and that's fine. But you're doing it with an understanding that you're taking a moment to reset the relationship and what's going on, or to get emotions under control to communicate better. All right. That's what that is. And that's what a soft next is that you're taking that moment or period of time so that you can come back and be healthier, whether it's just resume in a healthy manner or have a discussion. All right. Not the same as stonewalling. Now, some people do the soft next thing like stonewalling, and that's not my version of it. Okay, that's not what I recommend. That'll probably destroy your relationship. There's a lot of people in the red pill circles that talk about soft nexting or nexting a girl, and they're really meaning stonewalling, which is a tool of manipulation that cluster B personality disorder, narcissist, and antisocial personality disorder people do. Okay, so don't do that. All right, don't do that. Don't use it to manipulate. Okay, you're not trying to manipulate your partner to get her to do the right behavior. All right. You're simply removing yourself from the situation because the behavior that she is doing is something that you're not willing to tolerate. And she knows that, and you know that. Okay. There's not a question of why isn't he calling me back or what's going on. Right. Now, she may have some dread or concerns like, I don't know if he's coming back, or I don't know, did I lose the relationship? Or she may have some anxiety during that period of not talking. And that's fine. Okay. That's okay. All right. If major boundaries are crossed, it's kind of a consequence of that. But you're not doing it intentionally to manipulate the behavior or even to punish. All right. You're doing it because you're not okay with the behavior and you're not going to be around someone who's doing that behavior. And you're giving the opportunity for that relationship to reset itself and to resume with a better understanding of those boundaries. Or come back and have a discussion, right, where boundaries are discussed, reinforced, and everyone treats each other with love and respect, not contempt or in using criticism and defensiveness. All right. And so that's the difference. Big distinction here. Now, stonewalling, where you just cut the communication off to manipulate the other person, or because you're so dang indifferent, or if she does it to you, if a woman does it to a man, she is so indifferent probably at that moment. If she's not using it as a tool for manipulation, it's because she's doing it because she doesn't care anymore. Indifference is the opposite of love. Okay. Or she's trying to purposefully disconnect from you to punish you. Right. I'm going to take 2 days and not talk to you because I want to punish you. Or, I want to reinforce and try to make myself disconnect from this relationship so I can leave the relationship and have disgust and contempt for him. These are all things that are coming from, again, where is it coming from? A place of arrogance. An arrogant woman will just not talk to you because she's mad, right? Not because she needs to get her emotions under control. That's okay. That's healthy. Hey, I can't talk right. I'm not going to talk right now. I need time alone. I need time to think. That's okay. That's a healthy thing. But if it's to manipulate you, just ghosting your messages because she's not mad at you, or she's not happy with you, giving you the silent treatment. You know what I mean? That sort of stuff. Running off and not saying anything, not having any communication with you because she wants to punish you or because she wants to manipulate, control your behavior. Those are things that are really from a place of arrogance. I'm so much better than him that I need to control him. I'm going to punish him because by not talking to him because I'm better than he is. That is a place of arrogance that doesn't belong in a relationship. I'm telling you, arrogant people don't have good relationships and they destroy their relationships. They destroy themselves. And it's pretty sad, you know. Arrogant people are intolerant of mistakes and everybody makes them. Arrogant people are not compassionate for their partners. Arrogant people are stupid willfully, meaning their intelligence might be high, but their own pridefulness and arrogance makes them stupid. And they're thinking that they're better than everybody else causes them to lose good partners. Literally, they could lose the best partner they could ever have or want. And ladies, I hope you're listening to that one because women do that and it's a big risk. They'll lose their best, they'll alpha widow themselves from their own arrogance. They'll end up separate from someone who's a good partner for them because they can't accept their responsibility in a conflict or their responsibility in the problems in the relationship and what their contribution was. They can't even see what their contribution is in the conflict, in the problems in the relationship, because they're so arrogant and prideful that they won't even allow themselves to see it. If their partner goes to bring it up or tell them about it, even in the most adult and compassionate manner, they're not going to listen. They'll stonewall it. All right. Meaning, and that's another way of stonewalling is cutting the conversation off. You know, just defending can be used as a way of kind of stonewalling. I mean, classically, stonewalling is just a silent treatment or you know, nexting or walking away, but it can be just curbing that communication and what the other person's trying to say through attacks or redirection or other things, refusing to talk about the issue that this other person has. Once again, it's coming from arrogance and disrespect and disregard for the other person. And arrogant women lose good men and find themselves in a situation where they cannot replace the best man that they've had for the rest of their lives because they couldn't have compassion for that person. Even if mistakes were made and that dude makes mistakes or messes up royally, guy can mess up royally, they'll still lose that guy because they don't have any compassion for it, regret that decision way later, instead of taking their arrogance down about 10 notches and trying to have compassion for the other person, not being critical or defensive of their own contribution to the problem, or having contempt for the other person, and being able to communicate rather than stonewalling, and then work towards having a better relationship or letting their partner work towards a mistake, you know, fixing the mistakes that they've made. And now that's I'm talking about women to men, but here's the thing, men, that goes the other way. If your woman is capable of fixing things, the pair bond is there, she's worth it, you believe she's worth it, and she's willing to come into your frame and she's willing to work on her problems, you have to give her time to be able to work on those things. You have to give her time to demonstrate that she's capable moving forward, not try to pick up her apart, okay, and have contempt for her and look for every mistake she's made in the past and try to tear her apart and tear her character apart so you can discard her. That's abusive behavior, really, semi-abusive behavior. Instead, you have to look at it, decide whether she's worth it, whether the relationship is worth it, and then you have to allow her a chance to work on herself and correct what her pattern of behavior is that's not been good, right? Whatever she's been doing that's been causing distress or problems in the relationship, you have to give her time and understand too that she's not going to always flawlessly, seamlessly move forward without making other mistakes in the process. You know, there may be bumps in the road while she's trying to fix something, especially if she's had major problems or issues in the past, and that she's willing to fix or improve that. Now, a lot of you guys sitting in the audience are probably saying, well, women can't improve anything. What do you mean? There's a lot of people at different times that won't make improvements. Okay. So we see all that, but people do change and do make improvements all the time too. All right. And that includes women. Women's brains are wired differently than men. So the motivation for a woman to correct mistakes and make changes is different. And that process in her brain is a little bit different than how a man is doing it. But that doesn't mean that they're not capable of it. Okay. So that's important. Now, in general, some people will demonstrate not being capable of fixing something. And usually, if they're not being capable of fixing something, it's because they're arrogant. Okay, back to that again. If someone is arrogant, they're not going to recognize the mistake. They're going to defend themselves rather than own the mistake. And they're not going to take any measures to fix themselves. Look, you could have I recommend that a dude would take on a woman with a series and pile of mistakes if she would take ownership for each single one of those mistakes and actually make strides in fixing them, versus take a woman that seems perfect but is arrogant, and when she does make a mistake or a flaw is exposed, she doesn't take ownership for it. I would recommend taking the mistake-riddled person, because the person who doesn't take ownership will never be good in a relationship with you. I don't care how perfect she seems, because she will actually demonstrate at some point all four of these things. Someone who is arrogant will eventually be critical of you, will eventually be defensive if there's ever a problem, and not take ownership, not take responsibility. Will potentially can grow into having contempt for you. And stonewalling is definitely a behavior of arrogant people. So they're susceptible to doing at one or two to all of these things. And those things will just destroy you, destroy the relationship. There's no point in that. All right. So when selecting a good woman, and for my few female single listeners, for selecting a good man, you want to be aware of the stuff in the dating process. If you're dealing with somebody who is naturally critical of other people, criticizing the individual in a conflict and their personhood rather than the behavior, if they're defensive all the time whenever anything is brought up and you see defensive behavior, if they show contempt for others, that's a pattern that they have rather than compassion, or if they have a habit or pattern of stonewalling communication, that means that that person's not going to be good in a long-term relationship. You want to avoid that. And if you are dealing with a woman or a partner that does these things, you want to let them know that under no uncertain circumstances will you accept that. Criticism, defensiveness, or contempt, all right, needs to be met with a simple, hey, we're not in a mind state right now where we're being respectful or loving of each other. We need to take a break. We need to take a day or two, or we need to take a few hours, whatever it is. And then you separate yourself from the circumstance, you let them process things, let the emotions come down, and then can try to continue that at a later time. If they continue to show signs of being defensive, critical, or contemptuous, then you say, I guess, you know what? We're not ready for this yet. We have to come to the table here with compassion for each other and act like adults, okay? And I just don't think we're ready. I think the emotions aren't there yet. And then you take another break. You never let, as much as you can, do not let these discussions happen when someone's being critical, defensive, or contemptuous, right? And if someone is stonewalling a conversation, the only thing you can do is go about your business as if they don't exist. And when they're ready, they'll come talk to you, all right? And at that point, you're in the process of moving on. Okay, that doesn't mean you're dating or banging another person the next day, but it means that you're in that process of getting your life together and separating your emotions and moving on, because they are stonewalling you. They're not taking a moment. It's one thing to take, like I said, a day or something, or a couple of days to think about things, right? But if they're just curbing your communication and not allowing you to have communication with them, that is when you're in the process of moving forward until they're open to communicating. And when they are open to communicating and done stonewalling you, then you say, listen, you call out the elephant in the room. Hey, it's been like a few days, don't know where you're at, what you're doing. That's not appropriate. I understand if you need some time to process or think about things, but then you need to tell me that if that's what you're doing. All right. Not communicating is not how we have a healthy relationship. And when you do those things, I start to separate myself emotionally, mentally, and then that turns into eventually a physical separation. And we don't want that to happen. All right. You set the standard through a statement of fact. And so these are all ways of handling it. You can't allow these things to happen. If you're in a relationship now and they're happening currently, you might want to book a session with me so we can figure that out. All right. If you're a couple, you can book a session as a couple and we can stop communicating in this toxic manner. If your partner's doing it and you just want to book one with me yourself, that's okay too. So we can handle it that way. And certainly if you're doing any of these patterns, you need to not do those and find a different way of approaching the problem. But the last point here, and I've made it several times, so I want you to understand it, is that the root of these things is disrespect for your partner and arrogance, and being in an arrogant, prideful state, thinking that you're just better than everybody else, all right? And thinking that you're superior human being who's not capable of mistakes or flaws. That is the root of what causes these four things. If you can remove that arrogance, not be an arrogant or prideful person, and if you can remove that disrespect that you're wanting to have for your partner, and replace that with compassion and empathy, and understand that even if they're crossing boundaries that mean that are terrible enough or so egregious that you need to leave the relationship, you still approach that with compassion and empathy, not with these other things. Because if you're approaching it with these other things, that makes you just as as fault as they are. And you cannot sit back and say, I did everything I could to make this relationship work, when you were doing things from an arrogant position, because you were not making a relationship work. You were, in fact, destroying a relationship and pushing the other person, your partner, to destroy the relationship through your own behavior. So you are just as much a participant. Maybe the relationship should end, and that's fine, but don't have it be because you are the person who is making those mistakes. Thanks again for tuning in.